Hello, and welcome to Succession and Compatibility, 3 tools that ensure a great match. My name is Ann Buchanan, founder of RIA Match and the moderator of today's webinar. Our guest today is Tanya Rapacz, co-founder of the Partnership Resource. As heightened fiduciary requirements for retirement accounts and the amount of time needed for compliance and record keeping continue to expand, many seasoned advisors are considering retirement. Yet, not all are doing so thoughtfully, strategically, or even in their clients' best interests. According to Mark Diversion, 20% of advisors will retire in the next 5 years through a planned retirement or other unexpected issues. Succession planning is a serious discussion. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be up on the site on the webinar page on RIA Match by tomorrow. So be sure and let your colleagues know the session's recorded, and they can listen at their convenience. What I want to do is just take a second and tell you a little bit about RIA Match. RIA Match provides financial advisors solutions for succession planning and growth. We have 2 offerings. The platform offers low-cost self-serve solutions. You can search for free and pay to connect, anonymously and securely. Our RIA Match Concierge Consulting, we have consultants that provide personalized advice to help you crystallize your advisory firm's vision and goals. Then we create an action plan, and that helps you and we help you execute that action plan so that you are obtaining an enduring match. Our goal is to bring advisors the most efficient tools and excellent information so you can make the best decisions for the succession and growth of your firm. RIA Match has over 3,000 subscribers from 49 states that manage in excess of $250 billion. At this point, I want to introduce our featured speaker so we can get right into our content. Our guest speaker is Tanya Rapacz. Tanya is a co-founder of the Partnership Resource and a previous owner of an RIA. Tanya received training in mediation, negotiation, and conflict resolution from the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. Since 2012, Tanya's been mediating disputes between business partners and facilitating new partnerships. The Partnership Resource has been featured in Forbes, Investment News, Think Advisor, Nerd's Eye View, and other industry periodicals. Today, Tanya is going to share just a few tips that will help you assess the likely success of your matches. So Tanya, welcome.
Thanks, Marianne.
I'd like to share with you some results of the registration that the registration questions that you completed when you were listening to or when you were registering for the webinar. So right now, one of the questions was what type of firms are participating in today's webinar. The overwhelming majority of attendees, 48% of you, are mature solo practitioners. And this makes perfect sense, as what we're talking about is the need for succession planning and finding the right enduring match. 15% are early solo practitioners, that welcome. 11 are early ensemble, 4 are mature ensemble, 15% are market dominators. There are a lot of market dominators out there that are acquiring smaller firms. So it's important for you all to learn how to get these matches right as well. And 7% of you are next gen. 63% have not identified a successor. And shouldn't be alarming. We know this is an issue that approaches the industry average. We also asked, did you struggle to identify a successor, or are you currently struggling to identify a successor? And 58% of you said yes. So I think that certainly confirms the need for a discussion like we're having today. So Tanya, welcome. Thank you for being here. And let's just jump right into where we are. Why focus on compatibility as part of your succession plan?
Well, Marianne, as you know, I think there are a lot of great reasons to be in a business partnership in your investment advisory firm. And working a partnership into your succession plan can be very beneficial. The idea is that most transition plans include a period of time when the founder and successor, or the successors, have to work closely together. So not only negotiating how the whole transition will happen, but also meeting and re-signing the clients, reassuring the staff, rolling out the consistent marketing message. It may only be a year, but we frequently see founders wanting to slowly roll out of the business with a 7 or a 10-year plan. So the statistics on this slide are for all partnerships, but it shows how fraught the business partnership relationship can be. So we know from the Harvard Business Review that the failure rate for business partnerships can be as high as 70% within 5 years. Within 5 years, most business partnerships will fail. We also know from founders and funders that 65% of startups that do fail, the main cause that the founders gave was conflict between the partners. So it wasn't that they ran out of money or that their offering wasn't good. It's because of personal conflict between the partners. And then more recently, the last statistic here is from the 2014 NFP iTaste study about alpha acquisitions. They surveyed 100 firms that had gone through an acquisition and merger, and when they asked them, were you highly satisfied? In other words, would you definitely do it again? Only 25% said that they would and that they were highly satisfied. So obviously
that's a very noteworthy number.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Right. So obviously this is an area where we saw we could add some value in terms of looking at the relationship between business partners and to see how that could be improved to make partnerships more successful and more sustainable. Many people participating in this webinar may know of founders and successors who couldn't make it work. Even a well-crafted succession plan could get derailed if there's conflict once the plan has started. And now the founder's in a tough spot because they have to start all over again with a new plan and new people, and so much time and energy has been wasted. And if the founder has any urgency at all, like you referenced at the beginning, this can be devastating. So we have some tools that we use to assess and even foster compatibility between founders and successors. Both parties and their advisors will conduct due diligence on the successor's business background, financial wherewithal, compliance history, and this is one more piece of due diligence that may turn out to be crucial. So we're trying to put together a process to quantify this compatibility, but also lead to the robust dialogue that is necessary.
Oh, that's great. Well, I already advanced the slide. So tell us about these 3 tools that we can use to start to assess that compatibility. Great detail, great information.
Great. So we have 3 tools. The partnership resource has a compatibility score. We also have a negotiation prep worksheet and the partnership compatibility report.
Let me interrupt here just 1 second. I'm sure you're probably just getting ready to say that, Tanya, that Tanya has provided our handouts, and you can download them from your attendee control panel on the right. You can see that there. If you are listening to this as a recorded event, you can download the webinar materials in the RIA Match store. So they are the sample compatibility report, the negotiation prep worksheet, and the sample score. Go ahead, Tanya. Didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Nope, that's those handouts. I'll be referencing them throughout the presentation, so it might be helpful to be looking at them even though they'll be on the slides also.
Sure, sure.
So
and actually, then if someone was listening, okay, I was going to say if someone's listening to this and recorded, they could actually pause, go to the store, get the materials, and then look at them, or should they just watch the slides? What would you recommend?
I think it would be very helpful to have it to look at while we're going over them.
Okay, great.
So 2 of the tools are based on DISC assessments and related psychometric testing.
All right.
So if you move on to the next slide, we use TTI DISC assessments as the tools for measuring the behavioral style of business partners and what the implications are for better communication and conflict resolution. DISC is based on psychology research that started in the 1930s that measures how people behave along 4 different styles, the styles being dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. We work with TTI specifically because they continually submit their results to third-party testing to look at reliability and consistency. And TTI assessments have also been accepted by the EEOC and this other board, the OFCPP, that is monitors the guidelines for federal contracts. And these have been accepted as not having an adverse impact in hiring. So it gives us a little bit more confidence that they have been accepted. They also offer assessments of what they call the 12 driving forces, and I like to think of as values, which adds another dimension to our assessment of compatibility. And finally, they have an internal research department that continues to innovate. And for example, most recently, they've been using functional MRIs to test and validate the results of their assessments.
That is so impressive. It's really very, very good data that comes out of that. So now, tell us about the compatibility score. So this is sort of the first tool founders and successors can use.
Right. So this is something we developed in-house when we saw that there was an application to distilling all of the different data points that we had on compatibility into a single score. So the example of the score page in the handouts, and then it's also here on the slide. I'm also going to be referencing this again when we do the case study. The top section has a score in the box. Looks kind of like a grade because we are grading the natural strength of the match. There are 20 different data points used, and then the grade reflects how strong and natural the compatibility is between the style of one person and one other person. There are 3 ways that we look at the data. The first is number 1, the comfort zone, and that is looking at the most dominant styles of each person, looking from one person to another. What is the comfort zone between the 2 people in terms of how naturally they'll be able to understand each other or have trouble communicating? So for example, if 2 people are both high I, and that is high in influence, they have an excellent natural comfort zone. And the Venn diagram on the handout shows that they have a large overlapping area sort of to represent that, because both people are going to be very social and relatable and like to talk with each other and build trust through talking, they're going to have an easier and more natural time of getting along. Secondly, we look at complementary behaviors, and although this isn't critical, there are a few ways that people can use instances of complementary behaviors to strengthen their partnership. So if one person is high on one measurement and their partner is low on the same measurement, they might be able to, with some negotiation, use that to inform the roles and responsibilities within the partnership that they may decide to take on. So for example, if one person is high in dominance, that means that they like to decide quickly, always be moving and working on the next thing, and the other person is low in dominance, it might make sense to put the person who is higher in charge of new initiatives or a certain type of sales. It gives you a little bit more information about who is going to be naturally best at what role. And then the last section, which is the top 4 driving forces, is a section I think we feel is very important, and that is for each person, based on the assessment that they took online, and they were asked to continually rank statements, we can see how they prioritize the 12 different driving forces, and then we come up with the top 4 for each person, and then we look for alignment. We'd like to see people have at least one value in common, because that means there is at least one area where they look at the world in a certain way, and they will have an easier time understanding each other, and the less they'll have to struggle to get where the other person is coming from. If you have more than one value in alignment, that indicates just a strong level of compatibility, because when a new initiative comes up, it won't be as difficult for you to see where the person is coming from.
Great, great. And I love the visual aspect of this. You can really, it tells a story visually with the graphs, bar charts. That's the Venn diagram. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's a nice complement to the other materials that are in a different form.
Exactly. So now share with us the case study of how this score is used.
Right. So we put together a score for a case very similar to this. There was a founder ready to work on his transition, and he really wanted to increase his confidence that the transition would work out and be sustainable. He wanted to feel that the clients would be taken care of. He wanted to feel that the firm would continue, and that he wanted the staff and other advisors to feel good about the transition. So he used a search firm to look for potential successors. So he was already comfortable that the minimum criteria of a match had been met, and then started speaking by phone with many candidates. And after talking to, I think, maybe 20, he really liked talking to this one particular advisor and wanted to pursue it, even though they did not share a custodian and actually had different technology platforms.
And even though excuse me, Tanya, for interrupting, but I just want to say he talked to 20 potential successors.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's a really important number for our listeners to get to, because often they think, it's one or two and I'll be good. Let me just talk to a couple of people and I'll find the right person. 20, that's noteworthy. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I just wanted to point that out.
Right. So, I guess maybe even because of having spoken to so many different people, the founder wanted to conduct an extra level of due diligence. What kind of fit would the new advisor be? Would he get along with the founder while they work closely and the clients over the next 3 years? So we went through this process with the founder and the successor, and their match turned out very strong, an A-. And actually the handout that is the partnership compatibility score is what I'm using for this case study. They were both high influence and low in dominance, but even more promising was that out of the 4 top driving forces, they shared 3, and 2 in the same order. They were both harmonious, which means that they were both focused on the experience and the surroundings. They are also both receptive, which means they are comfortable with thinking outside of the box and not doing things the way they've always been done. And they are both collaborative by nature, happiest working on a team. So this gave the founder and the successor both a high degree of comfort going into the transition. This was a very successful business, and the same style that the founder had used to lead the staff and serve the clients was going to come more naturally to the successor, and this is something that now they both know. So I'm not saying that the successor can't change anything or risk failing, not at all. It's just that as a starting point, as he starts to work with the staff and work with the clients and take over the business, he already has a natural fit with the founder. And during the transition, if the successor is looking to maybe suggest some initiatives to the founder, he has a good chance of being able to make the case in a way the founder will respond positively to, because there are at least a few areas where they look at the world the same way. And now that they know this, they even have a common language that maybe they didn't have before to describe their relative points of view. And now, armed with this knowledge, they can start thinking about what about the transition needs to be negotiated.
Oh, that's great, and gives them confidence moving forward that when they come to a hurdle in these discussions, which in every acquisition or merger or succession, there are hurdles to overcome, right, that they know that sort of emboldens them to know that they'll approach it the same way. So are you ready to go on? Tell us about the negotiation prep worksheet, this second tool. How is it used?
All right, so this tool is the worksheet, also available at the site. The worksheet was developed by the Harvard Program on Negotiation, and it has wide applicability to preparing for any negotiation. It's 2 pages long, and it has 7 elements, and it serves as a guide for you to pull together the information that you will need to successfully negotiate a principled negotiation. It takes you through looking at the transaction from your own point of view, and then also primes you to think about the transaction and take the perspective of the other person, which can be very helpful in terms of coming together and generating options that will meet both of your interests. So the 7 elements are objectives, which is what is each of you trying to accomplish with this transaction. This would be a good time to clarify if this is a merger versus an acquisition, for example. The second thing that you need to come up with are what are the interests, what are the things that need to be true or need to be satisfied for this to be something you'd be willing to embark on. And it might not only be money. In the case study that we just went over, the founder was very concerned about having a good experience for his clients and a good experience for his staff. So this is kind of where you would make a note of that to see how that lines up with what the other person is thinking. Then the next section is options, which is what are the different things that could happen that would meet the interests above? What are the different ideas that you could come up with that would satisfy what both people are looking for? And this may seem very simple, but really going through the process of writing it down will spur the creativity and really thinking very clearly for yourself what your objectives are, not just going through a transaction because you know that that's something that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
The next section is the alternatives, which is where you, and this is a classic negotiating technique, is that you need to know what the best alternative is for yourself if you are unable to make a deal at this time. And trying to think through what the other person's alternatives are can also be very helpful in framing and accepting offers. The objective standards will help you from getting into a cycle of sort of that classic idea of negotiation where somebody names a price, the other person says, oh, that's ridiculous, I'd never pay that, and the other person, you know, gets offended, and then you try to fight it somewhere out in the middle. This is where you both kind of try to start agreeing to some objective standards that you could bring to the financial discussion. Communication and relationship are the last two elements, and they are related. It's more what information do you want the other side to know about you, and what do you need to know in order to proceed? What are your deal breakers? And then for the relationship, what kind of relationship do you have now? What kind of relationship do you want to have? Time can be a factor here. A one-year founder transition is different from somebody who wants to roll out 10% a year over 10 years.
Great, great. And that's very helpful. Now you also have the sample agenda items. So how does the negotiation prep worksheet and the agenda help difficult conversations? And is this something that people use on their own, or do they do it with a facilitator?
Right, so these sample agenda items are something that you would get to from going through the process. But it also does help with the conversations that can be difficult. And why are conversations difficult? It can be because of the emotions of the parties who are negotiating. Using this as a guide can help you take the perspective of the person you're negotiating with to help you gauge their intentions, to reflect on your own hot button issues, and maybe think about what the other person is afraid of but maybe goes unspoken. If there seems to be something in the negotiation that you're hung up on, it may be that the person, you know, is hesitant to move forward and not really ready to say that it's because they're having trouble with this transition. You probably know that there was an article in the December Journal of Financial Planning that excuse me, talks about the founders needing to let themselves go through a grieving process before they can successfully embark on a transition, literally experience the 5 stages of grief, because this is a big deal for the founder in terms of their identity. And it may be helpful for successors to keep in mind that even though this is a business transaction freely entered into, it also can be hard for the founder. For the second part of your question,
such a wise approach.
So this actually can be used on your own if you want to use it to sort of prepare for the negotiation. If you read Getting to Yes, the book from the Harvard Program on Negotiation by Roger Fisher and William Ury, you will get a good sense of the steps in preparing. It'll help you think through what you want and, most importantly, generate options that satisfy the both parties. However, if you're in a conflict or in maybe what could be a once-in-a-lifetime high-stakes situation, it probably makes sense to hire a neutral third party to facilitate these conversations. The facilitators can hear things that the parties don't hear, sort of actively listen and reframe the issues for the parties. The facilitators can help the parties see the benefits of different outcomes. And having a third party introduce ideas reduces the reactive devaluation that's kind of a negotiation term that refers to when you are wary of ideas simply because they come from the other side. And so this slide right here is an example of an agenda that was created to capture all of the items that the parties working separately expressed as an area of discussion.
Yeah, and I think that, in any situation where an advisor is considering selling their firm, it's a once-in-a-lifetime high-risk situation. So I think that your information is very helpful to them. I think that's really a critical time. It's a critical, decision, and from a wealth decision as well. It's probably their largest asset is probably their advisory firm.
Exactly.
So are we ready to go on? Let's look at the third and final tool founders and successors can use to talk about their compatibility.
All right, so there's also a partnership compatibility report. It contains all of the information from the DISC profile and the driving forces in a comparison, but then it goes deeper into the interaction between the two partners and what specific skills each is bringing to the partnership. It also can be used as a playbook for the best communication practices between two people, because it gives very specific and actionable advice about how to approach that person and remove obstacles for better communication. So again, a full length, it's 15 pages long, a sample of this report is available on the RIA Match website. One of the key pages is here on the slide, so I can use that as an example to talk about how this would be actually used in practice. And the way that it might be the best use of it is, here are two partners, Sydney and Avery, and Avery wants to come to Sydney to talk about something that's big and important. And before she does so, she reviews this checklist for the best practices in communication that are specific to the two of them. And so she knows that if she has something that's important to discuss, possibly contentious, she really needs to use an unemotional approach or be as dispassionate as possible when bringing up the subject, because otherwise she risks turning Sydney off and not having her message be heard. She also knows that because of Sydney's particular personality and preferences and behavior, she knows that she doesn't make decisions quickly. So if she needs her to decide something, she has to, where possible, give her the time and space to think about it or do her own research. So you can sort of see how that's information that now that you have it about your partner, you have a better chance of having your message be heard. Now at the same time, Sydney, knowing that Avery is coming to her with a big decision, is also preparing for the conversation to have it go as well as possible. And even though it might not be her preference for doing so, she doesn't dive right into business. She leaves time for asking some personal questions, for relating, and then also reviewing the best practices for this relationship. Knows that she needs to check in with Avery. If she makes a statement and Avery doesn't object to it, it doesn't mean that's because Avery agrees. It might be because she doesn't necessarily jump in when she doesn't agree with something. So it's a good idea for Sydney to check in with her to make sure that she is in agreement and to make sure she's watching her body language for approval or disapproval of what's happening. And the report also has ways not to communicate that can be just as important.
Right. It's tremendously insightful. Now, how do you see this information about compatibility increasing the sustainability of the venture, of a merger or an acquisition?
Yeah, well, we think that these tools are helpful whether you are just getting to know someone or have worked for them or worked with them for a long time. It starts out by making sure that you're taking a look at who you are and what you need, and then with an awareness of who they are and what they need, how will you best work together? And going through a process like this together builds commitment and trust, because it shows that you are willing to invest time and resources in the partner relationship. And as you take steps to adapt what you're saying to other people's style, you have more effective communication, so your message doesn't get lost. It also has the effect of resolving conflict, because you are now a little bit more aware. You can meet and anticipate the other person's needs. You can overcome objections and diffuse tensions before they start. And then for the partnership team as a whole, Now you have a common language for the team and the behavioral styles. Again, builds cohesion, leads to an ongoing, or at least the basis for credibility, trust, and commitment among the partners.
Yeah, I love this visual. It really captures the whole essence of it. But how do you use this compatibility information in your work with founders and successors?
Well, actually, let's go back to the house for a second.
Okay, there you go.
So if you think about buying a house, there's definitely some aspects or features to the house that you want to have, and those are the blue boxes. And when you're going into a transition, there are things that you want to get out of it. And what we're saying with this house analogy is that in order for this house to last, it needs to have an excellent foundation of a relationship that you can rely on, and that's what the compatibility and tools start to do. To keep the house upright, you need to continually engage in communication with your partners, and that's where the best communication practices come into play, because that allows you to be able to have robust discussions about all these different elements without having it devolve into destructive conflict. And then the partnership constitution, we'd like to think of that as being the roof that keeps rain out of your partnership, because it gives you a playbook before you even get started of what you will do when you don't agree and how you will resolve conflict and sort of what steps you will go through to make sure that conversations aren't getting personal and are sticking to your joint vision for the partnership.
No, that's great. That's great. Are we ready to go on now to the next slide? Mm-hmm. Okay, there we go. So this partnership constitution and what it looks like.
Right. So this is one of the things that we create from the facilitated conversations. And we call it the partnership constitution. It's the documentation of what has been decided and why. And it can be invaluable when partners are having a disagreement. Things will change as time goes on. One partner, for example, might feel that the other is not contributing what they once were or what they expected. And having a touchstone in writing can make that conversation about unmet expectations a little easier. It's not a legal document. It really just talks about the shared vision, the roles, responsibilities, what people will contribute, what they hope to get out of it, the different priorities. But it also incorporates in some of the best practices about communication and compatibility that the partners have already gone through.
Well, that's tremendously helpful. Now, how can participants learn more about your services and learn more about compatibility?
So we have a website. It's www.thepartnershipresource.com. And here you can take a look at the samples of our different reports, and you can also download our original research. If you'd like to subscribe, I'll send out updates usually about every other month. There's also a blog that talks about these different aspects, and then there's a link to my schedule, so if you'd like to have a call to discuss what your needs are, you can see my availability in real time.
Oh, that's very helpful. That's very helpful. Now, Tanya, you are graciously offering our webinar attendees a special offer today, so can you tell us about that?
Sure, and I'm happy to do it. So if you'd like to learn more or get started, please send me an email or use the link, and I'd like to learn a little bit about what you're looking for. But if you decide to go forward, I can offer you a 10% discount off the cost of the assessment and the debrief, which would allow you to get a compatibility report and a compatibility score. The cost of the assessment plus the debrief is regularly $500 per partner, but we can do it for $450 if you mention RIA Match.
Wonderful. Really appreciate that. And I'm so impressed with the information that's available through your services that really can ensure that a merger or an acquisition can really get off on the right foot and be sustainable. And so that's just a tremendous insight. So thank you. Now we're going to open it up for questions now. So you can see in the question box there, if you've got any questions you want to ask, go ahead and type those in. So we do have one question here. So he says, I've always been a solo practitioner. How can I start working with another advisor? So that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, yeah, usually when someone is operating as a sole practitioner, that's a conscious choice. That's something that was a lot of people, was very important to them, to have the independence and the autonomy of running your own firm, being the head honcho, calling the shots. But you may be thinking about what comes next and reprioritizing your interests. Do you want the financial rewards of having built a business, have more time to spend on other things, and not leave the disposition of the business up to chance? So it's time to start thinking about what things would you have to give up to take on a partner who will make all of these other things that you want possible. It's a little bit of, I guess, reframing, something that was important to you now, something that was important to you before, maybe falls down the list a little bit as you think of the other benefits you would get from entering into the succession plan and executing it.
Sure, your priorities and your priorities and your needs change over time, and so they may find themselves in a different spot now.
Right. Now, so they really need to get clear.
Yeah, yeah. The next question is, how expensive is it to have a negotiation facilitated? What does that look like?
All right. Yeah, that's a good question. I like to give a customized quote with a proposal that I would draw up after hearing more. But in general, a 4-hour session with up to 3 partners is $1,400.
Okay. Wow, that's tremendous. Think about all the having the pathway paved. That seems like a small price for for a handle on success. So I want to stop here. This has been very informative, very valuable. Tanya, thank you very much. Thank you to our audience for taking. Oh, it's a pleasure to do. We'll do another one, Tanya. These webinars with you are great. But thank you to our audience for taking the time to join us today for Succession and Compatibility. We are grateful that you're part of the RIA Match community. Good afternoon. This concludes our webinar today. Thank you so much.